When I was reborn, my phone screen was still frozen on that unsent message. Shenzi, I like you. After your interview, I'll wait for you downstairs at the lab building. The send button sat right there in the lower corner. In my last life, it was on the day of his postgraduate recommendation interview that I pressed send, driven by nothing but reckless passion. And with that, I dragged someone who should have been moving toward a brilliant future into the wreckage of my life. The hallway clock flicked to 9:16. In one more minute, Shenzi would walk out of the lab building, clutching his documents as he stood in the rain. His eyes would shine like stars freshly washed clean, and he would ask me, "Lu Hui, are you serious?" In my last life, I said yes. Back then, I really had the nerve. I had only 23 yuan and 60 fun in my pocket. My family was buried in debt, my biological father had gambled away the money, and I was hiding in a rental room like a corpse. I did not even know where next month's rent would come from, yet I dared to tell someone with such a bright future that I would give him a home. Later, I did give him one, a leaking rental room, an old neighborhood where the power would trip in the middle of the night, a dining table piled with bills and medical reports, and a life that kept forcing him to step backward. Shenzi could have lived under the spotlight. He could have joined an overseas exchange program, entered the best materials laboratory in the country, and pursued the flexible batteries he had dreamed of since freshman year. He could have studied energy storage materials. But because of me, he stayed in this city and helped me pay off debts. He stayed with me through startups, through failures, through countless nights we endured until dawn. He never complained. That was exactly why I remembered so clearly how he looked later, sleeping in a hospital corridor. That day, his father had been admitted. The other side was urging him to submit his paperwork, while he called me and said he was fine, folding the printed application again and again. In the end, he stuffed it into his bag and never took it out again. Only later did I learn that it had been his final chance. His final chance to apply for an overseas exchange. I stood before the self-service payment machine, clutching a bank card with insufficient balance. In that moment, even hating myself felt useless. My phone vibrated, and the classmate beside me bumped my shoulder. "Du Hui, what are you spacing out for? Didn't you say you had to confess today?" I looked up and saw Jiao Cheng's face lit with gossip-fueled excitement. He was still holding an umbrella for me, lowering his voice. "You revised that text until 2 in the morning. Don't chicken out today. A top student like Shenzi will fly away if you miss this chance." Yes, he was always meant to fly away. I lowered my eyes to the line on the screen. Rain tapped against the glass window, and students who had just finished their interviews passed through the corridor. Leather shoes stepped through the water, leaving behind soft, faint sounds. Slowly, I pressed the delete key, one word at a time. The promises I had spoken in my last life, the ones I failed to fulfill even after 10 years, disappeared from the screen just like that. The smile on Jiao Cheng's face froze. "What are you doing?" I did not answer. I tapped confirm delete. The instant my phone screen went blank, something inside me emptied too, as if someone had ripped out a piece of flesh grown deep into my body. The blood did not flow right away. All that remained was a dull, suffocating numbness. The laboratory door opened, and several people came out one after another. Shenzi walked at the very end. He wore a white shirt with a light gray knitted cardigan over it, holding the file envelope in his arms with a grip so tight it looked like he might never let go. A few raindrops clung to his lenses, and the ends of his hair curled slightly in the damp air, exactly like they had in my last life. The moment he saw me, he froze for a second. Then his eyes lit up. "Lu Hui." My throat tightened. That voice was far too familiar, so familiar I almost stepped toward him. Jiao Cheng, completely clueless, shoved the umbrella into my hand. He even winked at me and mouthed, "Go on." I gripped the umbrella handle, my palm slick with sweat. Shenzi took a few steps closer, his gaze falling on my phone. "Didn't you say you had something to tell me?" His voice was not loud, but the students who had just finished their interviews slowed down, clearly waiting to hear what came next. In my last life, it was under this teasing, red-faced, ambiguous atmosphere that I rushed over and held the umbrella above his head. I tried to look cool, but my hands were shaking. This time, I handed the umbrella back to Jiao Cheng. "It's nothing." Shenzi froze. "Nothing." I nodded. "I just wanted to say your interview should be fine. Congratulations." He looked at me like he could not understand a word, while Jiao Cheng sucked in a sharp breath beside us. He stared at me with an expression that screamed, "Have you lost your mind?" Shenzi pressed his lips together. "You waited here this long, just to say that." I lowered my head and gave a small laugh. It must have looked awful, because his brows drew together faintly. Afraid he would ask more, I spoke before he could. "Shenzi, from now on, don't waste your time on people who don't matter." His fingers tightened around the file envelope. "People like me, I slipped my phone into my pocket and took half a step back. After those words, the rest of my life suddenly became painfully clear. For one brief moment, the entire corridor fell silent. Shenji's eyes were so clean, so clear that I could see myself reflected in them. I could see the pathetic truth of me, 18-year-old Lu Hui, hair a mess, school jacket half unzipped, mud still stained the edges of my shoes, yet hidden deep in my eyes was the exhaustion I had dragged back from a life lived into my 30s. He stared at me for several seconds. Did something happen to you? That single question nearly broke me on the spot. He was always like this. Everyone else only saw me as reckless, impulsive, and useless, but from one wrong note in my voice, he could hear that I was barely holding myself together. In my last life, he had been the same, stepping toward me little by little, and then he took my ruined life into his own hands. I could not let that happen again. I turned my eyes away. Forcing myself to sound careless, I said, "What could have happened to me? I just suddenly figured things out. A top student like you and someone like me were never meant to walk the same road." The color drained slightly from Shenji's face. Jiao Cheng cursed, "Lu Hui, do you even know how to talk?" I ignored him. Shenzi ignored him too. He only kept looking at me for a very long time, so long that I almost could not remain standing. Then he pulled the file envelope closer to his chest and said softly, "The interview results aren't out yet." I said, "They will be. How do you know?" Because I remembered. I remembered everything. I remembered the day he secured his postgraduate recommendation, when the entire school forum was filled with his name. I remembered how he later hid his admission notice under his pillow, taking it out now and then to look at it, yet fearing I would see. I also remembered the time he got drunk. In a low voice, he asked me, "Lu Hui, if I had moved forward first back then, would you have blamed me?" At the time, I said I would not. But by then, saying I would not was already too late. I tugged at the corner of my mouth. "You're that brilliant. Everyone knows it." After saying that, I stopped listening. I turned and rushed into the rain. Jiao Cheng shouted after me, and Shenzi seemed to call my name too. But I did not look back. The moment I left the lab building, the cold rain came crashing down over my head and face. The plane tree leaves on both sides were beaten glossy by the downpour. I ran all the way to the bike shed behind the old library. Bent over with my hands on my knees, I panted until my chest ached. My phone vibrated again. It was a message from Shenzi, "Lu Hui, I don't believe a word you said today." I stared at that line, my eyes burning faintly. After a long while, I locked the screen without replying. Rainwater streamed down from my hair. I wiped my face with one hand, crouched under the bike shed, and opened the browser. When the search bar popped up, my fingers were stiff from the cold. Yet I still typed those words with brutal force. University town second-hand phone repair, wholesale parts. In my last life, the first money I truly earned started with an old phone with a shattered screen. Back then, Shenzi and I were already together. To buy him a birthday gift, I worked odd jobs for the owner of an off-campus repair shop. Later, the smartphone upgrade wave arrived. Parts, screen protectors, second-hand buybacks, campus repairs, every one of them was cash flow hidden inside a small business. But last time, I woke up too late. By the time I figured out the rules, more than half the market had already been taken. This life would be different. I still had time, and I still had all those paths in my head that the rain had not washed away. When Jiao Cheng caught up to me, I was saving several wholesale market addresses into my phone notes. Holding the umbrella, he was panting even harder than I was. "You've really lost it." Shenji's face went completely pale just now. I shoved my phone back into my pocket. "He'll forget soon enough." "Forget, my ass." Jiao Cheng stared at me and lowered his voice. "You've liked him for 2 years. The whole class can see it. Why are you suddenly acting so clear-headed today?" I looked up at the lab building through the rain. Shenzi was no longer at the entrance. "Good. Jiao Cheng, lend me 500 yuan. His curse got stuck in his throat. "What? Lend me 500. I paused. Then I added, "I'll pay you back 700 in a month." Jiao Cheng narrowed his eyes. "Did some pyramid scheme scam you or what?" "No." "Then why do you need money?" "To make money." His mouth opened, his expression, as if I had just said I was building a rocket tomorrow. I did not explain. I reached out and took the umbrella from his hand. "Lend me the umbrella too." "Where are you going?" I looked back at him. "To drag 18-year-old Lu Hui out of the mud." "Too." When I returned to the rental room, 2 bags of trash were piled by the door. The hallway reeked of damp mold, the wall paint was peeling, and the stair railing was sticky with oil from who knew whose home. In my last life, I hated this place more than anything. Later, I realized hating it was pointless. The rotten thing was the person, not the room. I took out my key and opened the door. Inside, the place was a complete mess. Beer cans were scattered across the coffee table. Cigarette butts and crumpled lottery tickets lay everywhere, and half a bowl of swollen instant noodles sat on the floor. Lu Cheng was still sprawled on the sofa. A filthy jacket covered his body, and his snoring shook the room like thunder. He was my father. More accurately, he was the debt I failed to truly shake off even until the day I died in my last life. After Shenzi and I got together back then, he came demanding money every few days. If I refused, he would make a scene downstairs, and Shenzi, afraid the neighbors would laugh, secretly paid him several times. He thought he had hidden it well, but later, I found out everything. Back then, I felt humiliated. I felt furious, like fate had chosen the softest part of me and stabbed straight through it. But now, looking at him, he was only the first pit in my life, the first one I had to deal with. I walked around him and entered the small bedroom. Under the bedboard was a metal tin. I opened it. Inside were only a few crumpled bills and an IOU. The IOU was for 3,800 yuan borrowed by Lu Chenghai, yet the borrower's name written on it was mine. The creditor was a small-time loan shark from Changnan. His nickname was Biaozi. In my last life, that debt snowballed into more than 20,000 yuan. To pay it off, I worked 3 jobs, and because of that, I missed the chance to attend the research summer camp with Shenzi. He told me it was fine. I believed him. Thinking back now, he had clearly already filled out the application form. I folded the IOU and slipped it into my pocket. Then I dug an old school bag out from the wardrobe. Inside were a few high school textbooks, a phone with a broken screen, and the tiny screwdriver I had left over after fixing a classmate's MP3 player. These few things were the tools I would use to set sail. Lu Chenghai was woken by the noise. He squinted at me. "Why are you back instead of going to school?" I ignored him and kept packing. He sat up and scratched his hair, immediately growing suspicious. "Are you hiding money?" I zipped the school bag shut. Then I turned and walked up to him. "Biaozi's 3,800 yuan was borrowed by you." Lu Chenghai froze for a second. Then he waved impatiently. "What's yours or mine? I raised you all these years. What's wrong with borrowing a little money under your name?" I looked at him and gave a cold smile. In my last life, hearing those words would have made me rush forward and argue. I would argue until the neighbors opened their doors to watch, until I ended up trembling all over. But now there was no need. I bent down, pulled a stack of lottery tickets from under the coffee table, then picked up the photocopy of his ID card beside his pillow. Lu Chenghai's expression changed. "What are you taking that for?" "This afternoon, I'll ask the police whether using a minor child's information to take out a loan counts as illegal." He jumped up from the sofa. "You dare?" I lifted my eyes to him. "You can try me." The room fell silent. Lu Chenghai was the kind of man who bullied the weak and feared the hard. In my last life, it took me far too long to understand that talking about family, grievances, or reason with someone like him was just handing him the knife handle. He stared at me, and for the first time, hesitation appeared in his eyes. "Did you take the wrong medicine today or what?" I slapped the IOU onto the coffee table. "Starting today, you pay your own debts. If Biaozi comes looking for me again, I'll take this IOU and the photocopy of your ID card straight to the police." "Lu Huai, you." I reached the door, then turned back to look at him. "This place expires next month. If you want to keep living here, pay the rent yourself. I won't pay a single cent for you anymore." He spat out plenty of ugly words, but I did not listen. As I left, I locked the door from the outside. Then I took the spare key down from the doorframe and threw it into the trash bin downstairs. It was not a complete solution, but at least, in this life, the first cut had finally been made. At noon, I arrived at South City Electronics Market. Back then, the electronics market was still chaotic. The entrance was plastered with ads for phone repairs, screen protectors, and 10 yuan second-hand buybacks. The narrow aisles were packed with people, noisy as a pot of dirty water boiling over. In my pocket was the 500 yuan Jiaqing had transferred to me. He said he was only doing it because I had clearly lost my mind after getting rejected today. Seeing that I did not correct him, I let it pass. 500 yuan was not much, but it was enough to buy a batch of cheap screen protectors and a few sets of screwdrivers, a few screens stripped from old phones, and a small folding table that could hold up my stall. But I did not rush to buy anything yet. I circled the market 3 times, noting which shops sold real goods, which ones loved scamming beginners, and which boss would later lose everything by stocking the wrong parts. I remembered most of it. The experience I had stumbled through in my last life had now become a ready-made map. At 2 in the afternoon, I stopped in front of a tiny shop tucked all the way inside. The owner's surname was Cao. He was short, round-faced, and when he smiled, he looked like someone selling fake medicine. In my last life, he was one of the earliest people to outsource campus repairs, and later, the first one willing to let me take stock on credit. At this time, Boss Cao had not made it big yet. His shop was piled with unsold old model screens, and he was squatting by the door eating boxed lunch. I walked over, crouched down, and glanced at the stock by his feet. This batch of 3.5-inch screens, you're planning to sell them at a loss, aren't you? Boss Cow stopped mid-bite. He looked up and sized me up. You know this stuff. I casually picked up a screen and checked the ribbon connector. A lot of students are using this model right now, and the screen break rate is high. If you leave them here waiting for walk-in customers, you might as well sell them to me. I'll take them to the university town and do on-site repairs. The boss laughed. How old are you? 18. 18. And you dare talk business with me? I said, then forget it. I'll ask the shop next door. That competitor next door is 2 yuan more expensive than you. But he's willing to throw in screen protectors. The smile on his face disappeared. So you really did look around. 3 full rounds. Boss Cow put down his boxed lunch, clapped his hands, and stood up. How much money do you have? 500. He almost laughed out loud. That's it, I smiled too. Brother, I'm not buying new stock. I want that dead inventory you have sitting at the bottom. Boss Cow stared at me for a few seconds. What makes you think you can sell it? I pulled the broken screen phone from my old school bag, removed the back cover in 3 minutes, then pointed out the screen ribbon position to him. Right now, plenty of students in the university town use this model. Official repair counters are expensive, and the small shops by the school gate charge randomly. I can make 30 to 50 yuan per repair, not counting screen protectors. For the first batch, I only need 10 screens. Once they're sold, I'll come back. Boss Cow finally looked at me seriously. Where did you work before? I put the phone back together, in a dream. He cursed and laughed. In the end, I spent 420 yuan on 10 screens, 20 screen protectors and 1 set of tools. With the remaining 80 yuan, I bought a folding table, and a white cardboard sign with red letters, phone screen protectors, repairs, screen replacements, data export. By the time I finished writing those words, I was crouched beneath the awning on the back street of the university town, my fingers stiff from the cold wind. The first order came painfully slowly. From 4 in the afternoon until 7 in the evening, I only applied 3 screen protectors. I earned 24 yuan. After dark, the rain stopped, and the crowd near the school's back gate finally grew. A boy came over holding a phone with a cracked screen and asked if I could fix it. I glanced at the model. Perfect. I could. He looked half convinced. How much? 80 yuan. The shop by the school gate charges 150. That's why you came to me. He stared at me. Can you actually do it? I did not waste words. I lowered my head and took the phone apart. A little over 10 minutes later, the screen lit up. The boy's eyes lit up too. Damn, you really fixed it. As he scanned to pay, I heard a girl nearby whisper. Isn't that Lu Hui from the lab building? Another girl said. That's him. Didn't he fail his confession to Shenzi today? My hands paused. The boy followed their words and looked at me, his expression instantly filling with gossip. Bro, you're that Lu Hui. I handed the phone back to him. It's fixed. Don't drop it again. He grinned and asked. So you really got rejected? I looked at the 80 yuan that had just arrived in my account, and that faint sting in my chest was quickly crushed by reality. Was I hurt? I packed up my tools and glanced toward the lab building. The lights there were still blazing. Shenzi was probably still waiting for the result, or maybe a professor had already called him in for a talk. He would keep moving forward, and I had to move forward too. I lowered my head and recorded the newly earned money in my ledger. I had no time to feel hurt. At 10 that night, I closed my stall. My total income was 196 yuan, and after deducting material costs, my net profit was 127 yuan. It was not much, but in this life, it was the first money I had earned back with my own hands. I bought a steamed bun and sat by the roadside, gnawing on it. My phone screen lit up. Shenzi had sent another message. You didn't go back to the dorm tonight. I stared at that message for a long time. My fingers moved several times, but in the end, I only replied with 2 words. Something happened. A few seconds later, he replied, stay safe. I placed the phone face down on my knee and exhaled toward the sky. Stop replying, Lu Hui. Right now, you do not even have a clean dining table. The next morning, I went to find Biaozi. He was in a pool hall in South City, a cigarette between his lips. When he heard I wanted to rewrite the IOU, he nearly laughed so hard the cigarette fell out. You little brat, delivering yourself to my door. I placed yesterday's earnings and the IOU on the pool table together. I'll pay 500 yuan first within a week. The rest will be paid off over 3 months, but the board will must be changed to Lu Chenghai, and he has to sign it himself. Biaozi looked at me like I was an idiot. On what grounds? I pushed over photos of Lu Chenghai buying lottery tickets and sitting at the gambling table. He borrowed the money, and he spent it. If he refuses to admit it, I'll submit this together with the matter of you forcing a minor to sign an IOU. The pool hall went quiet for a moment. The men beside Biaozi stood up. I did not step back. My palms were drenched in sweat, but I still did not step back. In my last life, they had blocked me before. They had pinned me down in an alley and beaten me, and I also knew what people like them feared most. It was not a fight. It was trouble. Biaozi stared at me, then suddenly smiled. Fine. The kid's grown a spine. It's not a spine, I said. It's that I have no money for your compound interest. He cursed, but in the end, he still sent someone to find Lu Chenghai. When I walked out of the pool hall, my back was already soaked through. Sunlight flashed across the puddles by the street, stabbing my eyes with pain. Then my phone rang. Zhao Cheng had sent me a screenshot. The school's public announcement list was out, and Chen Ji's name was ranked first. I stood at the street corner, staring at those two words. This time, he had still received what should have belonged to him all along. I lowered my head and smiled faintly. I saved the screenshot, then deleted the congratulations I had almost sent in the chat box. Behind me, Lu Chenghai's curses rang out from the pool hall. I slung my school bag over my shoulder and walked toward the electronics market. 3. On the day Shenzi secured his postgraduate recommendation, the school forum exploded for an entire night. Some people posted his photos, while others dug up his grades from the past 3 years. Someone even put him and me in the same thread, with the title so cruel it almost made me laugh. Top student rises ashore. Lu Huai sets up a phone repair stall after failed confession. A real-life gap between clouds and mud. Zhao Cheng was so furious he wanted to fight them in the comments. I was crouched under the awning on the back street, exporting data from a water-damaged phone, with 3 students waiting beside me for screen protectors. Ignore it. Zhao Cheng shoved his phone in front of me. They're insulting you right to your face. I glanced at it. Some people said I was a toad lusting after swan meat. Others said I had finally gained self-awareness. Some said Shenzi deserved better. That last part was not wrong. I wiped the water stains from the motherboard and reconnected the cable. The instant the phone screen lit up, the girl beside me cried out in surprise. It really turned on. Are my photos still there? I handed the phone back to her. Back them up first. Don't charge it directly. The girl nodded again and again. When she scanned to pay, she sent 20 yuan extra. Thank you. There's the last video of my grandma in here. Zhao Cheng watched it all happen. I really don't care, I said. He held it in for a long time, and in the end, he could only curse. You. Why do you feel like a completely different person now? I took the money and wrote it into my ledger. People have to change eventually. Over the next few days, business kept getting better. There were no secrets in the university town. Once one person's phone was fixed, a second and third soon followed. I ran my stall during the day, went to the electronics market at night to restock, and returned to the basement I rented temporarily after midnight. I slept for hours a night. The place was only 150 yuan a month, and mold grew in the damp corners. But it was still better than living under the same roof as Lu Chenghai. Biaozi's side rewrote the IOU, and Lu Chenghai cursed me for 2 days. Later, when he realized he really had to pay it himself, he actually came crying at my door. I did not open it. He kicked the door for half an hour. I called the police from behind it. When they arrived, his face was swollen red with rage. It was as if he had finally realized for the first time that I truly would not fall for his tricks anymore. Did it feel good? It did. But after that, I still lowered my head and did the math. Every night, I wrote down my income, costs, debts, and the models I needed for the next batch of stock. In my last life, I had suffered too much from being uneducated. Product cycles, cash flow, supplier credit terms, channel trust back then, any one of those words could knock me senseless. In this life, I could not rely on memory alone. I had to make every step solid. My messages with Shenzi grew fewer. He never asked again about what happened that day. He only sent the occasional simple line. It's raining today. Don't let your tools get wet. Someone on the school's back street said you're really good at fixing phones. Are you still going to class? That last message took me a long time to answer. I'm not going anymore. This time, he did not reply instantly. About 10 minutes later, my phone finally vibrated. Why? I stared at that single word. My fingers froze on the screen. Because I knew staying in school like this was useless. Because I knew I could not get into a good university. Because dragging it out for a few more years would not change much. Because at this exact point in time, electronics repair and second-hand trading around the university town were about to ignite. The smartphone upgrade wave would bring a surge of cash flow. Because I could not stay the same useless person who clearly had no ability yet still clung to others, yet still dared to drag you into talking about the future. In the end, I only replied, I have something else to do. Shenzi did not reply again. The next afternoon, Zhao Cheng came running to find me, saying something had happened to Shenzi in the lab. The screwdriver in my hand nearly stabbed into the ribbon cable. What happened? A project proposal of his was taken and submitted by a senior in his group, who claimed the core idea was his. Zhao Cheng spoke in a rush. His face was full of outrage. I heard it from the girls in our class. Shenzi seems ready to go to his advisor, but that senior joined the group earlier than him and is close to the professor. Now everyone in the group chat is saying he's just an undergraduate, trying to steal credit from a graduate student. I looked up. The sun was burning against the edge of the awning, bleaching the road white with heat. This had happened in my last life too, only back then, Shenzi never told me because he was afraid I would act impulsively. I only found out later when I discovered the proposal with the changed author name on his old computer, realizing how close he had come that time. He had nearly lost his advisor's trust. In my last life, it took him a long time to fight his way back, and because of it, he missed a summer project. I shoved the tools into Zhao Cheng's hands. Watch the stall for me. Where are you going? An internet cafe. I opened a computer there. I paid in cash. I knew exactly where the original version of Shenji's proposal was. In my last life, he had one habit. Every important file was always backed up in his email, USB drive, and the school cloud drive. That senior dared to steal it because he had changed the author name on the final submitted version, but he forgot about the version history in the cloud drive. I could not go straight to Shenzi. That would only look like entanglement, and I would never be able to explain it clearly. How did I know so much? I only needed to place the evidence in front of the people who needed to see it. I registered a new email and organized the cloud drive version history path, the file creation time, the method for retrieving the email screenshots, and the location of the chat records where that senior had once quoted Shenji's original words in the group meeting chat. I put everything into an anonymous email. The recipient was his advisor, and I copied the college research secretary. After writing it, I stared at the send button, my finger hovering there for a moment. Once this email went out, Shenzi would protect what belonged to him, but I also had to stop here. I pressed send. Inside the internet cafe, someone was gaming, their keyboard clacking loudly. I leaned back in the chair and closed my eyes for a second. This was the first time I interfered with his life in this one, and it could only happen once. At 7 that night, Zhao Cheng messaged me. Holy crap, it worked. The advisor called that senior into the office. Shenji's proposal is safe. I heard an anonymous email nailed the evidence completely. Don't ask me. I don't know. Zhao Cheng sent a suspicious emoji. It really wasn't you. I lowered my head and applied a screen protector for a customer, replying quickly. I'm busy applying screen protectors. That night, Shenzi came to the back street. I was replacing a battery for a boy. When I looked up and saw him, my hands paused for half a second. He was not wearing a white shirt. He had changed into a light blue jacket, holding a thick English reference book in his arms. The lights on the back street were messy and harsh. Smoke drifted up from the barbecue stalls, and students shouted all around us. Yet he stood there quietly, as if he had stepped in from another world. The boys waiting in line immediately started teasing. Lu Hui, the top student is here for you. I lowered my head and kept turning the screw. Give me a second. Shenzi really stood beside me and waited. After I finished replacing the battery and scanned to take the payment, he finally stepped closer. You've been here a lot lately, What about class? I'm not going. He looked at the pile of tools and screens beside my hand. After a moment of silence, he asked, Are you dropping out? I put the dead battery into the box. I haven't handled the paperwork yet. Why, this time, he was not asking why I stopped going to class. He was asking why. Why I was forcing myself onto a completely different road. I picked up the next phone and avoided his eyes. I can't study. Lu Hui. His voice lowered slightly. That day at the lab building. That wasn't what you meant. My fingers paused. The screen ribbon cable was fragile. One careless move and it would snap. I steadied my hand. I made myself very clear that day. You told me not to waste my time on people who don't matter. He looked at me. That was a cruel thing to say. I said nothing. Then he added, But after you said it, your eyes were red. The students nearby had already quietly backed away several steps. I lowered my head and heard my own heartbeat turning messy. Shenzi was truly troublesome. He could always see the places I tried hardest to hide. I put the phone back together and pressed the power button. The screen lit up. I handed it to the customer, keeping my voice as steady as possible. It's done. The customer scanned to pay and left. In front of the stall, only Shenzi and I remained. He placed the thick reference book in his arms on the edge of my folding table. Did you help with what happened in the lab today? I gave a small laugh. I don't even know where your lab is. He looked at me quietly. Is that so, I wiped the screwdriver clean and placed it back into the toolbox. Shenzi, I'm really busy right now. If your phone isn't broken, you should go back first. After those words left my mouth, the light in his eyes trembled faintly. He did not get angry. He only picked the book back up and held it against his chest. All right. He turned and walked to steps, then stopped. Lu Huai, if something really happened to you, you can tell me. I stared at the shattered screen on the table and did not lift my head. Nothing happened. Then he left. The noise of the back street surged back around me. I sat on the small stool, my fingers pressing against the edge of the broken screen. Only when the glass cut into my fingertip did I slowly let go. Zhao Cheng suddenly popped out from the side. Is your mouth welded shut with steel bars? I pressed a tissue against the wound. He asked you like that, and you still couldn't say one decent human sentence. I looked in the direction Shenzi had left. I couldn't. Tonight, this step had already crossed the line. His life had just stepped out of its first pit. My road had only just begun. If I turned back now, all the clarity I had fought for would be wasted. The next day, I moved my stall away from the back street. It was not to avoid him, but because near a vocational college in South City. A night market had just opened. There were more students there, and less competition. The demand was messier too. I rented a fixed stall with a deposit of 300 yuan. Zhao Cheng, as usual, called me crazy. He said I had barely stabilized, yet I was already changing places. I hung up the sign I had made overnight, Lu Hui Digital Repair. The lettering was a little ugly, but very eye-catching. On opening night, I took 7 screen protector orders, 3 screen replacements and 2 data exports later. By closing time, the cash in my pocket had grown noticeably heavier. Inside my phone lay a message Shenzi had sent that afternoon. Why isn't your stall on the back street anymore? I did not reply. At 2 in the morning, I crouched beneath the night market's tin awning, doing my accounts as the light bulb swayed faintly in the wind. Its shadow fell across my notebook. I wrote the final line for the day, net profit, 486 yuan. Beside it, I added one sentence. I cannot stop. 4. The first sum of money that truly changed my fate came even earlier than I had expected. That winter, a domestic smartphone suddenly blew up across the university town. It was cheap, the screen was large, and the camera made photos look good. Students bought it in huge numbers and broke it just as often. Official repair centers were scarce, screen replacements were expensive, and small repair shops could not get a stable supply of parts. By the time I noticed this opportunity in my last life, it was already 3 months later. By then, fake screens, salvaged screens, and refurbished screens were all mixed together in the market. Prices had been driven up, leaving little profit, and after sales disputes could drag a person to death. But this life, I camped out at Boss Cow's shop a whole month early. At first, Boss Cow found me annoying. You brat, you come here 3 times a day. Anyone who didn't know better would think I owed you money. I placed a bag of buns on his desk. Brother Cow, can you get this model's screen ahead of time? He bit into a bun and asked vaguely, why are you always staring at this model? It's only selling so-so right now. Soon. What's soon? Soon. It'll be getting smashed. Boss Cow nearly choked on the bun. Of course, I could not tell him that in half a month, this phone would sell like crazy across several local universities because of a sponsored campus photography contest. And once the event ended, repair demand would surge immediately. So I could only break down the market analysis piece by piece and explain it to him. Student budgets, seasonal buying cycles, forum buzz, offline channel distribution, and stock shortages among competitors in the same price range. Boss Cow listened for a long time before finally cursing. With that brain of yours, it's a waste for you to fix phones instead of studying. I smiled faintly. There are people more suited to studying than me. He glanced at me, that Shen kid. My hands froze for a moment. Boss Cow had sharp sources. Very little movement in the university town could escape him. I did not answer, and he did not ask further. He only pushed the account book toward me. Fine, I can give you the stock, but no delayed payment. I'll pay a 30% deposit, and the rest. Within 10 days, Boss Cow slammed his pen onto the table. Do you think I run a charity? I pulled out the cash flow notebook from my bag, covering the past few months. Daily income, repair volume by category, and parts consumption for every batch. I had recorded all of it clearly. Boss Cow flipped through a few pages, and his expression slowly changed. You really are treating this like a business. I was doing business from the start. He looked at me for a long while, then finally closed the notebook. 7 days. 10 days. 8. 9. Boss Cow froze. I pushed the buns toward him again. These meat buns were pretty expensive. He laughed in anger. Get lost. Get lost. 9 days it is. When that batch of screens finally came through, I poured almost every bit of cash I had into it. When Zhao Cheng found out, he nearly strangled me. Are you insane? What if they don't sell? I was making flyers for the new stall in the basement and did not even lift my head. They'll sell. How are you so sure? Because in my last life, I had seen more than one wave like this. I had seen students line up to buy the same phone. I had also seen repair shops put up signs saying screen replacements for that model required reservations, but I could not say that. I only handed him the flyers. Help me pass these out. When we're done, I'll treat you to dinner. Jiao Cheng looked at the words printed on them. Same model screen replacement, 20 yuan off. Show your student ID for another 5 yuan off. He fell silent for 2 seconds. You're looking more and more like a profiteer. The day the campaign took off, the line at my stall stretched from afternoon straight into night. During the busiest hours of the night market, I was so busy I did not even get a sip of water, tearing phones apart, replacing screens, testing, taking payments, registering after-sales details. A girl stood beside me with red-rimmed eyes, panicking because her phone held the homework due tomorrow. While tightening the screws, I asked, "Did you back it up?" She shook her head. "Back it up from now on." 10 minutes later, the screen lit up. She almost called me her lifesaver on the spot. Jiao Cheng handled payments and kept the line in order, and by the end, he did not even have the strength to scold me. A few days later, after I paid off Boss Cow's stock payment, I still had 13,000 yuan left. I sat on the small bed in the basement, spreading the money out bill by bill. The corner of the wall was still damp, and the light bulb was still dim. The tenant next door was still snoring, but I knew something had started to change. I was no longer Lu Hui, waiting for debt collectors to come knocking. I was no longer the Lu Hui who could only tell Shenzi that things would get better someday. I had truly taken one step forward. That night, I bought myself a bowl of beef noodles with extra meat. Halfway through eating, my phone rang. It was Shenzi. I stared at his name on the screen. My chopsticks froze in midair. More than a month had passed since the last time he came looking for me. I never expected him to call again. Just as the call was about to hang up, I answered. "Hello." The other side was very quiet. After a few seconds, Shenzi finally said, "Lu Hui, it's me, He seemed to let out a soft breath. "I know." I held the phone tightly. I heard the noodle shop owner shouting for extra noodles in the kitchen, while financial news played on the television. Shenzi asked, "Have you been okay lately?" I glanced at the steaming bowl of noodles on the table. "Pretty good," Jiao Cheng said. "You've been really busy lately." Doing what?" "Fixing phones." He paused for a moment. "Only fixing phones." I lowered my head and stirred the noodle broth. Shenzi was far too sharp. Even if I only exposed the tiniest loose thread, he could follow it and find the whole tangled ball. I also deal in some parts. That sounds exhausting. It's not. The moment I said it, even I felt how fake it sounded. Shenzi did not expose me. He only said softly, "Lu Hui, next week, the school has an innovation and entrepreneurship lecture. It covers supply chains, small business startups, and support policies. If you have time, you can come listen." I was about to speak. "You called me just to say this." From his side came the sound of paper being turned. I checked. There's a college student entrepreneurship subsidy in it. Even though you don't really attend class now, your student status is still active, so you might be able to apply. The steam from the noodle soup rose into my eyes, making them sting. He did not ask me why. He did not force me to turn back. He only used the only method he could think of, and handed me something practical. In my last life, he had been the same. When I was at my most lost, he never comforted me with empty words. He only laid out the plan and placed every possible step right in front of me. I tightened my grip on the phone. "Shenzi, Thank you." The other side went quiet for a moment. "You don't always have to be so polite with me." I could not say anything. The owner placed a small side dish on my table. "On the house." I nodded my thanks. Then, through the phone, Shenzi suddenly asked, "Lu Hui, when you told me not to waste my time on you that day, was it because you thought you would always stay like this?" My throat felt as if it had frozen hollow. Wine blew in through the noodle shop entrance. The plastic door curtain rattled loudly. I said, "No." He did not press me. Then I added, "I'll change." The moment those words left my mouth, even I froze. It did not sound like a promise made for him. It sounded more like something I was saying to my 18-year-old self. Shenzi laughed softly. "That's good." The laugh was so light that I almost thought I had imagined it. "Lu Hui, then keep going." After the call ended, I sat in the noodle shop for a long time. The beef noodles had already gone half cold. I opened my notes and wrote down the lecture Shenzi had mentioned. The next day, I went. Not to see him. I sat in the very last row, wearing a cap and holding a notebook, taking notes from beginning to end. The lecture was dull, but I listened more seriously than I ever had in any high school class. Supply chain payment terms, self-employed business tax registration, contract risks, those words. In my last life, I only learned after reality had beaten them into me. In this life, I had to learn them ahead of time. When the lecture ended, I was lowering my head to organize my notes when someone stopped beside me. I looked up. Shenzi was standing by the aisle. He held books in his arms, with two classmates beside him. When he saw my notebook, surprise flickered through his eyes. "You really came." I closed the notebook. His classmate smiled and asked, "Shenzi, who's this?" Shenzi was about to speak, but I stood first and tugged the brim of my cap lower. "An old classmate." After those 4 words fell, his gaze paused faintly. Not a friend, not someone ambiguous, not the person who had almost confessed to him, just an old classmate. I saw his fingertips slightly tap against the cover of his book, a tiny movement, but I still saw it. He did not correct me. An old classmate. I nodded. Then I walked past him. The sunlight outside the teaching building was bright. As I went down the steps, I heard someone behind me ask him, "Isn't he that Lu Hua who used to chase you?" Shenzi did not answer right away. After a few seconds, he said, "He's doing his own thing now." My footsteps stopped for a brief moment, then I continued forward. That afternoon, I went to the Administration for Industry and Commerce to ask about individual business registration. After closing my stall that night, I took down the old sign and replaced it with a new one, Lu Hui Digital. Underneath, I added a smaller line, Repairs, Replacement Parts, Campus Agency. The day I got my first business license, I laminated it and stuck it in the most visible spot on the stall. Jiao Cheng said, "You're smiling like you just got married." I looked at that thin sheet of paper. "It's more important than marriage, at least for now." 5. Shenzi and I truly began to grow distant in spring, after he entered his advisor's research group. He was so busy he almost never left the lab building. I secured campus agency deals at 3 schools, riding a second-hand electric scooter around the university town every day. A parts box was tied to the back seat, clattering loudly whenever the wind blew. Shenzi and I no longer contacted each other often. Occasionally, he would send me a message, and I would often take a long time to reply. It was not intentional distance. Most of the time, I truly could not spare a hand. Repair orders had to be delivered, after sales problems had to be handled, and lazy campus agents had to be replaced. Boscow was urging me again about new model parts. Once, I returned to the basement at 3 in the morning and only then saw the message Shenzi had sent at 9 that night. "I passed by the back street today and didn't see you." I stared at that message for a long time before finally replying, "I moved my stall." He did not ask where it had moved. That was good, and yet somehow, not good at all. In mid-April, the school held an outstanding student experience sharing session, and Shenzi went on stage as a postgraduate recommendation representative. Jiao Cheng insisted on dragging me there to listen for a while. "Stop burying your head in money every day." I was calculating commission for a junior agent and did not even look up. "Not going. Shenzi is speaking to." "Then I'm even less going." Jiao Cheng fell silent for 2 seconds. "What exactly are you trying to do?" I finished the calculation, closed the notebook, and said, "Make money." "You know that's not what I'm asking." Of course, I knew. But that was the only answer I could give. In the end, I still went, because after the sharing session, there were booths for several entrepreneurship clubs. I wanted to recruit 2 students who understood promotion for part-time work. The auditorium was packed. I arrived late and stood in the very last row near the door. When Shenzi went on stage, the lights fell over him. He looked steadier than he had a few months ago, wearing a white shirt and black trousers, his hair tied low. He held a clicker in his hand. Someone below whispered that he was beautiful, while someone else said he was unbelievably handsome. He had ranked first in GPA for 3 years, and competitions, papers, and projects he had not missed a single one. None of those voices affected him. He spoke about his study path, how to choose an advisor, and how research was not just a moment of passion. He spoke about figuring out whether you could truly accept long-term uncertainty. Near the end, he paused for a moment. "There's one more thing I only recently came to understand." The audience quieted. He held the clicker, his gaze sweeping across the seats. For a split second, it seemed to land on me, and I instinctively stepped half a pace toward the door. But his gaze did not linger for long. In life, some people will come close, and some people will suddenly drift far away. Before, I always wanted to ask why. Later, I realized everyone has their own steps to take. If the other person is truly moving forward, then wish them the strength to go even farther. Applause rose through the auditorium. I stood at the back, watching him bend slightly in thanks. In that moment, I suddenly realized he was also letting go. Not out of anger, but because he had finally accepted the distance I had carved open with my own hands. This was clearly the result I had wanted, yet when the applause rang out, my chest still felt as if something had struck it dully. After the session ended, I stood by the booths outside the auditorium, discussing part-time work with someone from an entrepreneurship club. He was a second-year student named Fu Cheng, sharp and quick on his feet. After hearing my campus agency model, he immediately asked, "Are you lacking promotion or management?" I glanced at him. "Both," he smiled. "Then what you're lacking is me." This man would later become one of the first people in the city to work on local lifestyle micro-advertising. In my last life, when I met him, he had already started his own company. In this life, he was still a student in a hoodie. His eyes were filled with ambition. I negotiated a partnership with him on the spot. The base pay was low, but the commission was generous. After hearing me out, Fu Cheng reached out his hand. "Boss Lu, happy cooperation." I shook his hand. "Don't call me boss yet. Call me Brother Lu." Jiao Cheng stood beside us, completely stunned. "You're this smooth at hiring people now," I said. "I'm pretending." Fu Cheng laughed even louder, and just then, Shen Ji's voice came from behind me. "Lu Hui." I turned around. He stood a few steps away, still holding the materials from the sharing session. 2 classmates were waiting beside him. Fu Cheng was sharp enough to read the room and immediately pulled Jiao Cheng away. Outside the auditorium, people came and went, and the posters swayed lightly in the wind. Shenzi glanced in the direction Fu Cheng had left. "You're doing pretty well now. I've only just started. I saw you from the stage earlier." I nodded. "Your talk was good." He smiled, but the smile was no longer as relaxed as before. It carried a little more politeness. "Thank you." Between us, words suddenly ran out. It had never been like this before. In my last life, as long as he stood in front of me, I always had endless nonsense to say. I would tease him, deliberately make him frown, and shove the very last piece of candy in my pocket into his hand. Then I would say, "The top student ate my candy, so you have to give me half your exam points next time." But now, I could only stand there properly, as if we really were just old classmates. Shenzi looked at the cooperation flyer in my hand. "Are you planning to keep doing this? You're not going back to school?" "Probably not." His eyelashes lowered for a moment. "Back then, you said you would change." I looked at him. He raised his eyes, his voice calm. "Now it seems, you really have changed a lot." I said, "People have to grow up eventually." He nodded. "That's good." Those 3 words were very light, yet they hurt more than when he had asked if something had happened to me. His classmate called out that the advisor was still waiting. Shenzi answered softly, then looked at me again. "Then I'll go first." "Okay." He had taken a few steps when I suddenly spoke. "Shenzi." He turned back. I almost told him not to work too hard. I almost warned him that the senior in the lab who seemed too honest was not to be trusted too much. I almost told him there would be a summer project application in May, and that he had to fight for it, but I could not say any of that. In the end, I only said, "I wish you a smooth road ahead." He looked at me as the wind lifted the loose hair by his ear, then let it fall again. "You too." After that day, Shenzi never sent me another private message. His moments would occasionally update: lab coffee at 2 in the morning, award lists, and project group photos. Every time I saw one, I would pause for a second, then turn off my phone and go negotiate the next batch of stock. After Fu Cheng joined, Lu Hui Digital moved even faster. He knew how to promote, how to recruit agents, and how to deal with different clubs and societies. I handled the supply chain and after-sales, building the repair standards, price lists, and return repair process bit by bit. The day our first small campus shop opened, I stood at the entrance and watched the workers hang up the sign. "Lu Hui Digital Service Station." Fu Cheng stood beside me taking photos. "Brother Lu, smile." I could not smile, because I suddenly remembered that in my last life, when I opened my first shop, Shenzi had stood at the door looking even happier than I was. He had bought a bouquet and placed it on the counter, saying, "Boss Lu, may your opening bring great fortune." Later, when that bouquet withered, he still could not bear to throw it away. He wrapped it in craft paper and pressed it inside a book. In this life, there were no flowers on the counter. There were only 2 strings of firecrackers Fu Cheng bought from next door. Business was good on opening day, and by the time we closed, we were doing accounts until 11 at night. Fu Cheng's eyes shone with excitement. "Brother Lu, at this speed, we can open a second shop." I looked at the ledger. "Stabilize after sales first. Your way to steady." I've fallen before. Fu Cheng thought I meant business. I did not explain. In May, Shenzi got the summer project slot. His name appeared on the college announcement board once again. When I saw it, I was on a long-distance bus heading to an out-of-town wholesale market. The carriage smelled awful, and someone beside me was snoring. Dawn had not yet broken outside the window. I stared at that announcement screenshot for a long time. This time, he had not missed it. Good. Truly good. I saved the screenshot, turned off my phone, and lowered my head to keep reading the supplier quotation sheet. On that trip, I was going to negotiate a batch of new model power banks. In another half a year, demand for portable chargers would rise. Many small factories would rush in during the chaos, and another batch would be wiped out by quality issues. Before that happened, I had to find a reliable OEM factory. There was more money now, but also more problems. I had no time for sentimentality, but when the long-distance bus stopped at a service area, I still got off and bought a bottle of warm milk. In my last life, Shenzi always loved making me buy this before business trips. I stood in the cold wine holding the milk, then suddenly smiled. Then I gave it to a car-sick child nearby. Some habits should no longer be kept for myself. In late June, I received a message from an unfamiliar number. Manhwa, it's Shenzi. I changed my number, save this one. I stared at the message for half a minute before replying. Got it. He did not reply again. I saved the new number into my contacts under the same name, Shenzi. After that, I put my phone back into my pocket. Then I looked up at the row of low factory buildings ahead. The sign at the entrance had already started peeling, but I knew. Inside this place was the next thing I had to seize, a chance to move from repair stalls and campus shops toward the true upstream supply chain. I patted my face and walked in. That factory was called Hongsheng Electronics. It was not large. The equipment was half old, and the owner's surname was Liao. He was in his 40s, heavily addicted to cigarettes. Whenever he spoke, he liked to narrow his eyes at people. Fu Cheng came with me the first time, and the moment we stepped out, he said, "Brother Lu, this place looks like it's about to go bankrupt." I said, "That's exactly why there's an opportunity. In my last life, Hongsheng really had almost gone under, but 2 years later, demand for power banks and small energy storage products exploded, and they turned things around with a batch of stable battery cells and strict quality control. Later, they were acquired by a major company. Back then, when I wanted to work with them, I could not even get a meeting with Boss Liao. This time was different. Boss Liao was short on orders, and I was short on an upstream supplier. We were both poor, and that was why we could sit down and talk. The first negotiation did not go smoothly. Boss Liao thought I was too young. When he heard I had started with campus repairs, he laughed right in the corner. "You can sell phone screen protectors, sure, but power banks are different. If something goes wrong, they can burn down a house." I took the sample apart and placed each piece on the table one by one. "That's why I don't want the lowest price. I want stable batches, traceable battery cells, factory test records, and a return repair agreement." Boss Liao's hand paused as he lit his cigarette. "You understand this, I'm learning. From who?" I pointed at the 3 premium samples on the table. "From them. Among those 3 models, one overstated its capacity, one had terrible heat dissipation in the casing, and one had weak solder joints around the charging port." I broke down each problem for him, then took out half a year of campus user feedback, student dorm usage scenarios, charging frequency, acceptable price ranges, and after-sales pain points. After Boss Liao finished listening, he finally put away that dark, dismissive look. "You want to build your own brand?" What's it called?" I said. Fu Cheng froze for a second beside me. I had only decided on that name last night. There was no profound meaning behind it. I simply hoped that one day, I could stand up from the wilderness and have a place that could truly anchor me. Boss Liao did not comment on the name. He only asked, "How many do you want for the first batch?" 500 units. Fu Cheng nearly choked on his water. Boss Liao laughed too. 500 units. "Can you even swallow that?" I said, "If I can't, they'll rot in my own hands." He stared at me. "You've got guts." I replied, "Without guts, I wouldn't have made it here. For that first batch, I put in more than half the cash I had." That night, Fu Cheng and I sat in a small motel doing the accounts until his face nearly turned gray. "Brother Lu, if these don't sell, the past half year of work goes down the drain." I folded the quotation sheet. "They won't fail to sell. Here you go again. This time, it's not a guess." I wrote down dorm electricity restrictions, freshman enrollment, club activities, short trips, and smartphone battery drain demand, one line after another. After listening, Fu Cheng fell silent for a while. "Do you have some future market report in your head or something?" My pen paused. "Something like that." He thought I was joking, cursed under his breath, and went back to calculating logistics. On the day the first batch of key power banks launched, I personally stood behind the cashier counter. We made 3 price tiers, offered a 7-day student ID discount, and promised replacement for quality issues. Fu Cheng came up with a tacky but effective campaign: buy a power bank, get a custom data cable free. That week, our 3 campus stores sold out twice. Students even lined up asking when we would restock. I stood in the warehouse, watching box after box of products with the key label being carried out, and suddenly felt as if none of it was real. In my last life, I had built a brand too, but back then, debt and survival pushed me forward. Everything was urgent, and everything terrified me. In this life, for the first time, I had stepped ahead of the opportunity by choice. At the end of the month, when we settled the accounts, after deducting costs, staff wages, rent, and after-sales reserves, the net profit was even higher than I had expected. Fu Cheng hugged the ledger and spun around the shop. Brother, are we about to get rich? I slapped an after-sales repair form against his chest. Don't get carried away yet. Run quality checks on the third batch. He let out a miserable wail. You really know how to ruin the mood. I smiled faintly. Ruining the mood keeps us alive. As the money grew, more people started coming after me. Lu Chenghai somehow heard I had opened a shop. He came to the storefront and caused trouble once, but this time, he could not even get inside. Fu Cheng stood at the front with 2 power banks blocking him. I came out of the office and handed him an agreement I had prepared long ago. It stated clearly that his debts were his own responsibility. Every payment I had made for him over the years had receipts, transfer records, and witnesses. Lu Chenghai immediately started cursing. He called me an ungrateful wolf, cursed me for having money but no filial piety, and kept shouting until his voice went hoarse. When he realized not a single onlooker was standing on his side, I looked at him and felt almost nothing inside. If you come to my shop and make trouble again, I'll sue. I'm your father. That's exactly why I'm leaving you some dignity. I placed the agreement in front of him. Sign it. From now on, I'll transfer you basic living expenses every month, but don't come looking for me, and don't go looking for anyone around me. He said I was dreaming. I nodded. Then I'll see you in court. In the end, he still signed it. The moment the pen touched the paper, I suddenly remembered the time in my last life when he went to Shenzi for money. Shenzi had stood at the neighborhood entrance holding project documents, surrounded by people pointing and whispering, his face pale as paper. In this life, that scene would never happen again. After the door closed, Fu Cheng asked if I wanted to drink to celebrate. I shook my head. We don't celebrate this. Something like this isn't worth celebrating. It just had to be handled. In July, Shenzi left for the summer project. He updated his moments with a lab photo. In it, he wore a white coat, safety goggles, and held a thin material sample in his hand. The caption had only one sentence. For the first time, I've truly touched the direction I want to pursue. I stared at that photo for a long time. Flexible energy storage materials, that was his direction. In my last life, reality kept dragging him down, and he worked on it on and off for years. Later, someone else industrialized the project first. When he saw the news, he stayed silent for a very long time. Back then, we had only just crawled out of debt. I said, there'll be other chances. He smiled and said, there will. But even now, remembering that smile still made my chest ache. I enlarged the photo, noted the lab bench number behind him, then closed moments and opened my computer. That night, I did not look at the ledger. I started searching flexible batteries, energy storage materials, wearable devices, medical patches, auxiliary power for electric vehicles, and piles of other specialized terms. I could not understand them, so I wrote them down one by one. The next day, I went to the bookstore and bought books. When Fu Cheng saw me return with several introductory materials science books and new energy industry reports, his face turned green. Brother Lu, have you finally gone so crazy that you're teaching yourself how to build batteries? I put the books on the desk. I'm not building them. Then why are you reading this? To find the road I'll walk in the future. He flipped open one of the books. The moment he saw the dense formulas inside, he snapped it shut. This road looked seriously jammed. I did not argue. It was jammed. For someone like me, who had not even properly finished high school, reading this stuff was harder than chewing stones. But I could not refuse to look just because it was hard. In my last life, my greatest pain was not poverty. It was when Shenzi spoke about his world. And all I could do was nod and say, that's amazing, without even understanding why it was difficult for him, or why he felt so unwilling to let go. In this life, at the very least, I wanted to understand. In early August, Kai's second batch had a problem. One shell supplier had secretly switched materials, causing abnormal heat dissipation in some units. By the time we discovered it, more than 30 had already been sold. Fu Cheng's face went pale. Maybe we shouldn't announce it yet. We can replace them when customers come back. I looked at him once, and he immediately shut his mouth. I picked up my phone. In every campus agent group, I sent out a notice. Some units from Kai's second batch carry a heat dissipation risk. Batch number TY07 to 8. Users, stop using it immediately. Bring it to any store for a free replacement and one complimentary compensation cable. Fu Cheng looked at me. This will cost us a lot, and it'll hurt our reputation. Hiding it would hurt worse. Over those 3 days, we lost quite a bit of money. I also chased Boss Liao into retesting everything until he nearly fell out with me. I sat in the factory office and laid out the abnormal data, user feedback, and temperature test charts one by one. Boss Liao, right now, we're both small. If we take one loss, we can still climb back up. But if a dorm really catches fire, neither of us gets to keep doing business. Boss Liao's expression turned ugly, but in the end, he still accepted the recall, and our accounts tightened all at once. Fu Cheng did not sleep well for several days straight. Neither did I, but 1 week later. Someone posted on the forum saying that although Key had a problem, its handling was faster than even big brands. Others showed off their free replacements. That wave of public opinion did not crush us. Instead, it made the brand stand even firmer in the university town. When I saw back-end orders rising again, I finally let out a real breath of relief for the first time. That night, I returned to the office very late. On the desk sat a cup of coffee that had already gone cold. My phone screen was lit up. Shenzi had sent me a message. I saw your recall notice. You handled it well. I stared at that line. Exhaustion suddenly surged over me. After a long while, I replied, thanks. Then he sent, so what you're making now is power banks. I looked at the new energy industry report spread open on my desk. For now, this time, he took a long while before replying. And after that, I lifted my head and looked out the window. The lights of the university town stretched together through the night, and a few lights still glowed in the distant lab building. I knew he probably had not slept either. I lowered my head and typed, after that, I want to make something more durable. Shenzi replied, that's good. A few seconds later, he sent another message. Lu Hui, you've really come a long way. I looked at those words, and my heart felt as if something had gently touched it. It did not feel like praise. It felt more like he had finally admitted I was not running away. I was moving forward. I did not continue the conversation, because Fu Cheng pushed open the office door. Holding a new channel list, his eyes shone with excitement. Brother Lu, schools from other provinces want to discuss agency deals. I placed my phone face down on the desk, then we talk, now. That night, we recalculated the channel model until 4 in the morning. When dawn was about to break, I slept on the desk for half an hour. In my dream, I returned once again to the day of the postgraduate recommendation interview. Shenzi stood in the rain and asked me, Lu Hui, are you serious? This time, I did not answer. I turned and walked onto a long, dark road. At the end of it, he was not there. There was only a brightly lit laboratory, a production line running past midnight, an industry report covered in my handwriting, and many years later, the version of myself I could finally present without shame. When I woke, pale daylight was showing outside the window. Fu Cheng was snoring on the sofa. I picked up a pen and wrote one line on the first page of the report. Kai's next stage, shifting from consumer electronics accessories toward small-scale energy storage and flexible application supply chains. After writing that, I paused for a few seconds, then added beside it, understand Shenji's direction. When the pen tip fell, I did not feel like I was calculating anything, nor did I feel like I was waiting for anyone. This was my road, and it was also the answer I would have to show him one day when I stood before him again. 7. September, the back-to-school season. Kai's third batch of stock arrived at the warehouse entrance, filling to small trucks. Fu Cheng stood beneath the rolling shutter, watching the driver unload box after box. The excitement on his face lasted less than 5 minutes before turning completely into nerves. Brother Lu, if this batch crashes, none of us are sleeping this year. I handed him the inventory sheet. Inspect the goods first. He looked down at the full page, raised the random inspection rate to 20%. Test the ports, temperature rise, and capacity. Fu Cheng walked into the warehouse clutching the sheet with a bitter face. By then, he had already grown from 3 campus stores to 17 university agent points. We had rented our first proper warehouse and hired 2 after-sales staff. 3 part-time customer service reps joined too. Fu Cheng had gone from a part-time student to a partner with salary and dividends. The first time I paid him, he stared at the bank notification for a long time. Brother Lu, even my dad has never given me this much money. Does your dad make you move stock at 3 in the morning? Not really. Then he's getting off cheap. He called me heartless, then turned around and polished customer service scripts until 2 in the morning. We had both been poor, and once people who had been poor saw even the smallest way upward, they would tear it open with everything they had. He grew fast, so fast that sometimes even I felt a chill down my back. More orders meant more traps. Agents secretly cut prices. After-sales disputes dragged on, people copied our packaging, and even small shops outside other schools sold no-name products labeled as being from the same factory as Key. At first, Fu Cheng was so angry he wanted to take people and block their doors. I pressed him down in the office and made him organize every piece of evidence into a timeline. Report it, file complaints, release a statement, and have every agent sign a new agreement. He scratched his hair in frustration. That's just slow. A long-term business has to be slow. After saying that, I pushed a new contract to him. From now on, every agent point signs a sales authorization code. After sales must be traceable and tied to batches. Anyone who messes around gets cut off from supply. He flipped through a few pages. Then he suddenly quieted down. Brother Lu, you're looking more and more like a real boss now. I was replying to Boss Liao's email. Without lifting my head, I asked, what did I look like before? Like a ruthless guy running around with a toolbox. And now? Now you look like the kind of guy who makes other people carry the toolbox. I smiled faintly and lowered my head to keep revising the contract. Over these years, I learned all kinds of things. I ran markets during the day, studied finance courses at night, negotiated channels in the morning, and crouched beside factory production lines in the afternoon. 1 second, I was drinking tea with someone. The next, I was holding return samples and checking temperature-controlled data. Words that once made my head ache could now be written into contracts and negotiated across the table. I never went back to school. In the end, my student status was officially withdrawn. On the day I finished the paperwork, Zhao Cheng waited for me at the school gate. He held 2 bottles of soda and handed me one. Do you really not regret it? I twisted off the cap. The bubbles rushed up and splashed onto the back of my hand. No regrets. Does Shenzi know? I took a sip of soda. He'll know. Zhao Cheng looked at me as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, he only sighed. He's leaving next month to study for graduate school out of town. My fingers paused. That's good. Zhao Cheng cursed. You really are as hard as a brick. I looked at the students coming and going through the school gate. Shenzi would also leave from here, carrying his luggage, his documents, and his admission notice, heading to a bigger city and a better laboratory. In this life, he had not been delayed by me. That thought let me breathe in relief. Yet it also left my chest hollow for a long time. On the day he left, I did not go see him off. I was negotiating new battery cells at a factory in another province, with heavy smoke hanging in the conference room. The other boss pushed the price extremely low, his tone light and careless. Young President Lu, it's good for young people to have drive, but the market runs deep. Don't think selling a few student products means you can build a brand. I pushed their quotation sheet back, changed the quality clauses, and I can sign. If you can't, I won't do this batch. The other side smiled. You're short on stock right now, aren't you? I am. I looked at him. But I'm even shorter on lives to gamble with. The conference room went silent for a moment. Fu Cheng sat beside me and almost burst out laughing, only to force it back down. In the end, that order was not signed. On the way back, Fu Cheng was a little worried. Brother Lu, we really are short on stock. I know. The agents are pressing hard. No matter how hard they press, we can't take risky goods. I watched the streetlights retreat outside the car window. Fu Cheng said quietly, sometimes, the way you hold the line is honestly scary. I did not answer. In my last life, for speed, for a chance to turn things around, and to make Shenzi suffer a little less. I had taken many orders that looked like lifelines but almost became death traps in the end. Back then, no one stopped me. Reality never gave me room to make mistakes either. In this life, I refused to survive on luck again. In October, he faced its first cash flow crisis. Payments from the 3rd batch came back slowly. Raw materials for the 4th batch required prepayment, and agent expansion had tied up our inventory. The books showed profit, but there was no money in the account. When finance placed the report on my desk, even their voice was lowered. President Lu, we can last 20 days at most. It was the first time they called me President Lu, and it sounded strange. But I could no longer get through things like before by saying, I'll think of something. Outside the office, customer service was answering calls, the warehouse was packing orders, and Fu Cheng was leading people to check invoices. Everyone was watching me. I held that report and worked through the night. The next morning, I sold off half of the second-hand equipment I owned. I shut down 2 underperforming agent points, suspended a low-margin product, and even canceled the single room I had just rented. Then I moved back into the company attic. When Fu Cheng saw me bring my luggage into the office, his expression turned ugly. Brother Lu, it hasn't come to this yet, has it? It has. You could have told us. I already did. I pointed at the new notice posted by the door. This month, management salaries would be delayed, while frontline wages would be paid as usual. Fu Cheng stared at that sheet of paper. His eyes suddenly reddened a little. You're really ruthless. To myself too, I unfolded the folding bed. We just have to get through it. During those 20 days, I slept only 3 or 4 hours a day, running to banks for credit, pushing payment collections, negotiating supplier terms, and keeping watch over every account period. After sales could not collapse, on the hardest day, I sat at the warehouse entrance eating a cold boxed meal. My phone lit up. Shenzi had sent a photo of his new laboratory workbench. Several flexible electrode samples lay on the table, and the light struck the edges of the thin sheets like a faint layer of fluorescence. His caption was simple: "First day in the new place." I looked at it for a long time, the cold rice still in my mouth. Somehow, it did not feel so hard to swallow anymore. I replied, "May everything go smoothly." He soon replied, "You too." I put my phone back into my pocket. Then I stood up and kept moving stock. By the end of the month, payments from the out-of-province agents arrived, and the bank's small credit line was approved. The fourth batch entered the warehouse smoothly. He did not die. On the day we survived, Fucheng bought 2 cases of beer, and the after-sales staff, customer service reps, and warehouse crew sat on the office floor eating barbecue. Someone drank too much, raised a skewer, and shouted, "President Liu is awesome." They forced a glass of beer into my hand. It tasted bitter, but for the first time, I felt this company had truly grown a backbone. 2 years later, Key went from a campus digital service station to Key Energy Technology. We moved into our first proper office building. It was not tall, only 6 floors. But the night the rooftop sign lit up, Fucheng stood downstairs and took more than 10 photos. "Brother Liu, look." In the photo, the 4 words Key Energy glowed against the night. Staring at them, I suddenly remembered that rainy day years ago. I had deleted that message and crouched beneath the bike shed, searching for second-hand phone parts. Back then, I only had 500 yuan I had borrowed. Now, behind me, there were factories, warehouses, teams, channels, and an energy supply chain I had only just managed to touch. But I knew it was still not enough. I was still one final stretch away from Shenji's world. That winter, I saw his name on an industry conference list: Shenzi, PhD candidate. His presentation title was "Design of Flexible Micro-Energy Storage Materials for Wearable Devices and Research on Interface Stability." I stared at that line for a long time. Fucheng poked his head in from the door. "Brother Liu, are you going to the New Energy Industry Forum?" I closed the list. "I'll go." When I saw Shenzi at the forum, he was being deliberately challenged. The venue was on the 3rd floor of Linjiang Hotel, where the carpet swallowed every footstep. The lights on stage were stark white, and the screen behind him still showed the final page of his project presentation: Industrialization Path for Active Micro-Energy Storage Devices. Shenzi stood on stage in a dark blue shirt. His long hair was pinned up, and compared to the person who once held a file envelope outside the lab building, he seemed calmer now. And sharper too. After he finished speaking, someone from an investment firm in the audience picked up the microphone. "Dr. Shen, your paper data is beautiful. But when we look at projects, we still look at commercialization. Flexible energy storage manufacturing requires heavy upfront investment and long payment cycles. Does your team have mature mass production experience?" Shenzi held the clicker. "We have completed 5 sets of repeatability verification, and the cycle stability of our small-sized samples has met expectations. For mass production, we need cooperation from the process side to keep advancing. So in other words, you don't have it." The man smiled. A few people below laughed quietly along with him. I sat in the back row, my fingertip tapping lightly against the armrest. Shenzi did not panic. He switched back to a middle slide filled with data. The laboratory stage and the mass production stage required different teams working together. We have not packaged laboratory data as a mature product, and we do not intend to make external promises without verification. Capital can't wait too long. That is why we are looking for people who understand long cycles. As he said this, his gaze swept across the audience. There was no pleading in his posture, and he did not lower himself in the slightest. In that instant, I suddenly wanted to laugh. Shenzi was still Shenzi, even caught between funding, patents, and industrialization. He remained exactly himself. He was not in a hurry to sell off what belonged to him either. The second question was even sharper. The person asking it came from a wearable device company and was surnamed Liu. In my last life, this company later launched the first flexible power module and took the first step into medical patch orders. I remembered it clearly, because Shenzi should have had a place in that. Mr. Liu flipped through the project proposal, sounding polite while pushing hard. "Dr. Shen, your patents are still under the school's name right now. Your core team also hasn't completed company formation. If we invest capital and production lines, how will future intellectual property ownership be guaranteed?" Before Shenzi could speak, a teacher accompanying the school side took the microphone first. "That can be discussed. The school also encourages commercialization of research results. If a company is willing to invest, we can be more flexible with equity ratios. Shenzi tilted his head slightly. The movement was faint, but I saw it. He did not like that answer. Mr. Lu smiled. Then that's good. We are more inclined to sign an exclusive development agreement first, with later authorization granted to our company to advance it. That would be more efficient. Some people below nodded. Shenzi picked up the microphone. Exclusive development can be discussed, but long-term patent licensing and ownership of future improvement results must be made clear. Mr. Lu leaned back in his chair. Dr. Shen, researchers have their own principles. We understand that. But for a project to leave the laboratory, someone has to bear the risk. We're providing the money and the production line. You also need to show sincerity. That word did not sit well with me. Sincerity. In my last life, I had heard it far too many times. When someone without money tried to negotiate terms, the other side would ask where their sincerity was. I raised my hand toward the staff. Fu Chang sat beside me, and immediately lowered his voice. Now. When the microphone was handed to me, several people in the front row turned back. Shenzi also looked over. The moment his gaze landed on my face, it visibly paused. I stood up. The venue lights shone from the side, and I could feel countless gazes pressing onto me at once. Lu Hui from Key Energy, someone in the front row whispered. Over the past few years, he had gained some recognition in small-scale energy storage and wearable supporting power supplies. We were not industry giants yet, but at least we had the right to speak in this venue. I looked toward Shenzi on stage. He was looking at me too, after so many years apart. Between us lay an entire conference aisle, steps, a screen, investors, project proposals, and all the words I had deleted or swallowed back. I shifted my gaze to Mr. Lu. I'd like to ask Mr. Lu a question. Mr. Lu smiled calmly. President Lu, please, what packaging solution does your company currently use for flexible power modules? The smile on his face faded a little. That involves our internal technical details. Then I'll ask it another way. After repeated banding tests, how many cycles can your current product maintain above 80% capacity retention? Mr. Lu did not answer right away. I continued, if neither of these questions is convenient to answer, then your company wants exclusive development rights, long-term licensing for future improvement results, and claims to bear so-called production line risk. But where exactly does that risk fall? The venue fell silent. Shenji's hand moved slightly around the microphone. Mr. Lu straightened his posture. President Lu, are you negotiating on Dr. Shen's behalf? No. I lifted the project proposal. I'm a potential partner. Clarifying technical boundaries and commercial responsibilities should be the basic action of every partner. Fu Chang lowered his head beside me, holding back a laugh. Mr. Lu's expression darkened. He is interested in this direction too. Very interested. I looked toward the stage. Dr. Shen, if the project needs industrialization verification, we can provide pilot production line packaging tests, supply chain coordination, and first-phase commercialization funding. The audience stirred instantly. The school representative's eyes lit up, and he was about to speak, but Shenzi spoke first. President Lu. His voice was extremely calm, so calm that even the storm rising inside me was pressed back down. Have you read the complete technical materials? Only the public papers, roadshow materials, and the report just now. Then isn't it too soon for you to propose cooperation? I looked at him. That's why I said we can provide support, not that we should sign today. He nodded. If he is interested, please follow the formal review process afterward. Project data, patent boundaries, team rights, and stage goals all need to be discussed item by item. Someone below laughed, probably thinking he really did not know how to read the room. But I could not laugh. I only thought this was good. He did not hand the project over just because I was Lu Hui, nor did he rush to grab a rope simply because he was willing to invest. He still looked at the project first, the rules first, and whether he could control it himself first. Holding the microphone, I nodded solemnly. All right. After the forum ended, many people surrounded me. Some handed me business cards, some invited me to dinner, and some tried to find out whether Qi was truly planning to invest in flexible energy storage. Fu Chang blocked half of them. President Lu has another meeting later. I'll take the cards. I passed through the crowd and saw Shenzi standing at the end of the corridor. His advisor was beside him. His lab mates and the school representatives were there too. He was listening to someone speak, his brows and eyes calm. In his arms, he held that project proposal. Just like years ago at the lab building entrance, he was still holding tightly to what belonged to him. Only this time, what he held was not postgraduate recommendation materials, but every step of the journey that had brought him here. I did not walk over immediately. Only after the people around him thinned a little did I approach. Dr. Shen. He looked up. This time, He did not call me Lu Hui. He looked at me for a few seconds, then extended his hand. President Lu. I shook his hand lightly and briefly. His fingers were a little cold, and there were faint pressure marks on his palm from long hours wearing lab gloves. I let go. Long time no see. He closed the project proposal. It has been a long time. People passed through the corridor, glancing back at me from time to time. Shenzi did not avoid my gaze. I didn't expect you to come. I saw the list, so I came. Because of the project. I paused. Because of the project. The corner of his lips moved slightly, impossible to tell whether it was a smile or something else. That's good. Those 3 words made my heart pause. He handed me a business card. This is the project email. If Q wants to learn more, send a formal letter of intent. Our team will reply through the unified process. I took the card. Very businesslike. Very Shenzi. He had drawn the boundaries with perfect clarity. I nodded. Tomorrow morning at 9, the letter of intent will be sent to that inbox. He seemed a little surprised. That soon? We've been preparing for a long time. He looked at me. We. I said, Key. He lowered his eyes to my business card. Then he looked at the project again. Lu Hui. In this life, he finally said my name again. My fingers tightened slightly. His voice was very soft. All these years, have you really been moving in this direction? I did not answer right away. River wind blew in from outside, making the glass door at the end of the corridor sway faintly. I remembered the first introductory materials science book I bought. I remembered the industry reports written at 4 in the morning, the formulas I could not understand, and all the terms I had circled page after page. I said, I walked for a long time. He looked at me, something complicated flickering in his eyes. But he did not press further. Someone called from nearby. Shenzi, the professor is looking for you, he answered. Before leaving, he turned back to me. Lu Hui, the project is the project. I nodded. I know. I won't lower my standards just because we knew each other before. And don't raise them either. He froze for a second. I looked at him. Use your own standards. This time, he finally smiled. It was faint, but it gently pried open a crack in all the cold air that had frozen between us over the years. After Qi sent out the letter of intent, Shenji's team took 3 days to reply. It was not a simple welcome to cooperate. It was a 26-page document request list. Fu Cheng's eyes went straight when he saw the email. He's treating us like examinees. I flipped through the list. Good. What's good about this? It means he isn't relying on old feelings. Fu Cheng leaned against the desk and stared at me for a few seconds. Brother Lu, can I ask now? This Dr. Shen is the Shenzi from back then, right? The office fell a little quieter. I printed the email and arranged it by page number. Fu Cheng drew in a breath. So all these years, you studied materials, looked into energy storage, and pushed into small power supplies because of him. I looked up at him, because of the market. And because of him. I did not deny it. Fu Cheng spun the pen in his hand and, for once, did not make a joke. Brother Lu, the way you are now is good. Don't lose your balance the second you run into him. I smiled faintly. If I were going to lose balance, I wouldn't have let you sit here today. He nodded. Fine. I'll set up the technical meeting. 26 pages, right? We're not embarrassing ourselves either. Inside Key, 2 voices quickly formed. One side believed the flexible micro-energy storage direction was worth laying out ahead of time. The other side felt Shenji's project was too early, with no short-term profit in sight. The company was expanding, and there was no need to sink money into a lab. At the board meeting, the finance director laid out the cash flow pressure clearly. President Lu, we just secured 2 wearable device clients, and existing production line upgrades have already tied up a large amount of capital. Dr. Shen's first phase budget isn't high, but later validation, equipment, and team coordination will keep burning money. Another investor valued research too, but still said, the uncertainty is too high. He needs stable orders now. It isn't suitable to rush into a high-risk project. Fu Cheng sat on my left without speaking. He knew that if he defended me emotionally at a time like this, it would only make things worse. I projected Shenji's public project materials onto the screen. I'll talk about the market first. The meeting room lights dimmed. Several sets of data appeared on the screen. Medical patches, sports monitoring, flexible sensors, and wearable terminals. Any device that needed to fit the curves of the human body could not avoid miniaturized and flexible power supply. What Q was doing now was still external power supplies and small energy storage modules. They looked like they were selling well, but they were highly replaceable, and a price war would come sooner or later. I switched to the next slide. If we only hold on to our current products, we can live comfortably for 3 years, but after 5 years, we'll be dragged into the mud by lower-cost factories. The finance director looked up. So Dr. Shen's project is a card for 5 years from now. It's the entrance to a future product line. I took the technical path from his paper, our existing packaging capabilities, the process stages Hongsheng Electronics could support, and the potential needs of wearable clients, then connected them one by one. It was not empty talk. Every link had a corresponding contact, cost estimate, and stage goal. By the time I finished, no one in the meeting room mentioned personal ties again. The investor flipped through the materials, his expression much more serious. When did you prepare all this? Last year. Fu Cheng turned his head to look at me, but I did not look at him. This plan had indeed been in preparation for a long time. From the first time I saw the flexible electrode samples in Shen Yi's moments, I knew this road would have to be taken sooner or later. It was just that back then, I was not yet qualified to stand before him. Whether the first was qualified now would still have to be proven by the project. After the meeting, the board agreed to move forward with due diligence and small-scale trial cooperation. It was not unanimous, but it was enough. The day I led the team to Shen Yi's lab, the sky was gloomy. He brought our technical lead, legal affairs, and supply chain team. Shen Yi's side was just as formal. His advisor, the school's technology transfer office, 2 of his lab mates, and Shen Yi himself were all there. In the meeting room, the 2 sides were clearly separated. Shen Yi and I sat across from each other with a long table between us. He was not wearing a white coat, but had changed into a light-colored shirt. In front of his computer lay a thick stack of experimental records. President Liu. We'll begin with data authenticity and repeatability. I nodded. Go ahead. He explained everything in great detail. Material ratios, cycle testing, bending radius, capacity retention, and the causes of packaging failure. Some parts were highly specialized, and I struggled to follow. But at least I could keep up. Kai's technical lead asked several questions, and Shen Yi answered quickly and steadily. When it came to industrialization difficulties, he paused. The greatest current risk is that the lab preparation process has extremely high requirements for environmental humidity and coating uniformity. Direct scale-up will cause batch differences. Our technical lead nodded. This problem can be solved through process window testing, but it will consume samples. Exactly how many must follow the test plan? When he said this, his gaze landed on me. We cannot sacrifice data just to rush progress. I replied, agreed. The teacher from the technology transfer office cut in. If Ki is willing to invest, the school hopes the first phase can produce a displayable sample as soon as possible. There's a municipal achievement exhibition at the end of the year, and the schedule is tight. Shen Yi's brows tightened slightly. I put down my pen. A sample can be displayed, but the display version and the verification version must be separated. A demo does not represent a mature product, and all external materials must state that clearly. During the testing stage, the teacher looked a little embarrassed. President Liu, that kind of publicity may weaken the promotional effect. I said, a weaker effect is still better than being chased for responsibility later. Shen Yi glanced at me. It was brief, but I saw the tension in his eyes loosen slightly. During the noon break, he did not go to the cafeteria with the school side. I saw him beside the vending machine downstairs from the lab building. He was buying coffee. The machine got stuck. He tapped the body of it once, but the coffee still did not fall. I walked over, scanned the code, and bought a can of warm milk too. The coffee and milk rolled out together. He bent down to pick them up, then looked at me. You still remember? I froze. Warm milk. He used to drink it before business trips in my last life. Only then did I realize I had bought it out of habit again. I reached out and took the coffee. I'll drink this. He held the warm milk in his hand and did not expose me. The 2 of us stood by the corridor. Outside the window, a light rain began to fall. Shen Yi suddenly said, Lu Hui, you investing in this project. How much of it is because of me? The question had come after all. I looked at the coffee can in my hand. How do you want me to answer, honestly? I lifted my head. The earliest reason I started paying attention to this direction was indeed because of you. His fingers tightened slightly around the milk. I continued, but Kai's decision to move forward is because this direction fits the company's future layout. The board looked at the plan. The technical team looked at the data. Finance looked at the phased budget. Shen Yi looked at me. And you? I looked at those 2. He did not look away. After a moment of silence, I added, and I looked at you. The air froze for several seconds. I pressed the coffee can into my palm, its metal edge faintly cold. Shen Yi, I don't want to make this sound too pretty. If someone else negotiates this project, they might give you faster money, a bigger share, and promises that sound better. He can't give you those. Then what can you give? Clear boundaries, production lines that can run tests, cash flow that can endure a long cycle, and a way of cooperating that won't force you to call data a product. His eyelashes moved slightly. I said, If you feel it isn't suitable, you can reject it. You won't feel embarrassed. No. And I won't think you're ignoring old feelings either. I looked at him. You don't owe me old feelings. After I said that, he lowered his eyes and let out a soft laugh. The smile was faint, but there was not much ease in it. Lu Huai, you really speak very steadily now. I smiled too. I'm pretending. He raised his eyes. When I'm not steady, I simply don't speak. He quietly looked at me for several seconds. Then why didn't you speak back then? Someone passed through the corridor. The footsteps came close, then slowly faded away again. I tightened my grip on the coffee can. Back then, I didn't have anything worth saying. Shenzi did not ask further. He opened the milk and drank it. I'll push this project forward according to process. If Ki fails the technical review, I won't go easy on you. If it passes, during cooperation, I also won't lower my requirements just because you're Lu Huai. I know. He threw the empty can into the trash. Then we continued this afternoon. He turned and walked toward the meeting room. I stood where I was and slowly breathed out. Fu Cheng popped out from around the corner. Brother Lu, I looked at him, and he raised both hands. I wasn't eavesdropping. I was openly standing here listening. I tossed the coffee can at him. He caught it. What did you hear? Fu Cheng thought for a moment. I heard that Dr. Shin is not easy to chase. I looked toward the meeting room door. Shenzi had already returned to his seat and opened his computer. He was discussing the next round of test plans with Kai's technical lead, lifting a hand to tuck loose hair behind his ear. Then his expression turned serious, and he did not look back at me. I said, "This isn't chasing." Director Fu nodded. "Fine, then we'll call it pre-merger due diligence." I kicked him once. At 4 in the afternoon, the first phase cooperation framework was finalized. No exclusivity, no transfer of core patents. He would fund the establishment of a joint pilot platform. The school would retain basic research rights, while Shenji's team kept authorship and leadership over later research and development. The industrialization company would be established separately afterward. The equity structure would only be discussed after sample verification. At first, the school representative was not very satisfied, but Shenzi insisted. I insisted too. When the framework finally landed on paper, Shenzi picked up the pen and signed his name first. His signature was beautiful, every stroke steady and precise. I signed the 2 words Lu Huai on the company side. Across several lines of clauses, our names landed on the same page. It was not a love letter. It was not a text message. It was a cooperation agreement. Yet it felt more like a beginning than any confession I had prepared at 18. 10. In the first month of the project, 37 sets of samples were burned through. Fu Cheng looked at the reimbursement forms, the corner of his eye twitching several times. Brother Lu, this is even more direct than literally burning money. I flipped through the test records. If burning them exposes problems, then it's worth it. And what if all we burn out is ash? Then we change the plan. He slumped over the table and sighed. Money from research people is really hard to earn. I glanced at him. This isn't quick money. He raised both hands in surrender. I get it. Long-termism. I've learned the fancy words. The joint pilot platform was built beside Hongsheng Electronics' old factory building. Boss Liao complained nonstop. He said I was ignoring perfectly good mature orders just to mess around with thin films alongside a university team. But the day the equipment arrived, he was more eager than anyone. This machine can really control it within that range. Shenzi nodded. Theoretically, yes. But we need to calibrate it first. Boss Liao looked at him. The usual careless air of an old industry fox was clearly gone. Dr. Shen, tell us how to adjust it. We'll cooperate. Shenzi did not hold back. He posted the experimental procedure on the wall and clearly wrote out the person responsible for every step: temperature, humidity, coating speed, drying time, and roller pressure. At first, the factory masters were not used to it. They were used to relying on experience, while Shenzi wanted data, even if the deviation was only 1 second. One veteran worker muttered under his breath, "If it has to be this detailed, how are we supposed to mass produce it?" Shenzi heard him. He walked over without getting angry, only picked up a failed sample. "Please look here." The edge has wrinkled. It doesn't look very different to the naked eye, but during testing, the cycle count drops by half. The veteran worker leaned closer to look. His brows slowly tightened. Just that tiny bit. Just that tiny bit. Shenzi handed him the record book. Your experience is strong, so you're the most likely to notice when the machine sounds off. And if anyone tries to cut corners, please help me record it. The veteran worker froze at that sentence. After a few seconds, he took the book. All right, I'll try. I stood beside them watching, and suddenly remembered when Shenzi first taught children at a tutoring center in my last life. At first, those students refused to accept him, thinking he was too young and explained problems in too much detail. But later, one by one, they treated him like a lifeline. He never used his voice to overpower people. He simply did the work so well that people had to respect him. The first phase of testing did not go smoothly. The materials performed well in the lab, but once they entered the pilot process, the batch differences became terrifyingly large. By the third week, samples kept failing, and the school side began to grow anxious. Registration for the Municipal Achievement Exhibition was approaching, and the school hoped we could at least produce a displayable demo sample. He was under pressure too. An investor called me. President Liu, if this project keeps burning money like this, where is the turning point? I sat in the stairwell of the factory, listening to the voice on the other end of the call. There are still 2 weeks before the first phase milestone. If there's no result after 2 weeks, we'll review according to the agreement. If necessary, we pause. Can you do that? I looked down at the lights still glowing in the pilot workshop below. Shenzi was still inside. He had not slept properly for 3 days straight, and a trace of silver-gray powder stained the cuff of his white coat. While reviewing the data, his fingers kept pressing against his temple. Yes. After hanging up, I sat in the stairwell for several minutes. Then I got up and went downstairs. The pressure inside the workshop was suffocating. The technicians gathered around the testing machine. Shenzi stared at the newly generated curve, his brows tightly locked. Boss Liao held the record book, and even his usual sharp, impatient energy was gone. Shenzi said nothing. He pulled up several sets of data for comparison. I walked over. Where's the problem? He pointed at the third set. The interface impedance is rising too quickly. The lab samples didn't have this issue. Our technical lead said, it may be uneven coding during scale-up. Boss Liao added, it could also be packaging pressure. Shenzi shook his head. We already adjusted the pressure 2 days ago. The trend didn't change. He lowered his head to check the records. Inside the workshop, only the low hum of the equipment remained. I flipped to a page of humidity records, then suddenly stopped. Were these 3 failed sample sets all made during the night shift? Shenzi looked over. What did you find? I turned the record book toward him. Humidity fluctuates more during the night shift. You recorded the humidity inside the equipment, but you didn't separately record how long the material was exposed outside before entering the machine. Shenzi's eyes changed instantly. He quickly flipped through the earlier records. A few minutes later, he lifted his head. Add one more test. Keep the material transfer time under 30 seconds, and add a temporary drying box in between. Boss Liao immediately called people over. That night, no one left. At 2 in the morning, the new sample entered testing. At 5 in the morning, the first set of data came out, and the curve finally stabilized. The workshop fell silent for several seconds. Then someone cursed under their breath. It really was that. Shenzi leaned back in the chair and closed his eyes for a moment. He was too exhausted. I placed a cup of hot soy milk beside his hand. He opened his eyes, looked at the soy milk, then looked at me. Why are you still here? Don't you have a meeting tomorrow? I already sent Fu Cheng. He picked up the soy milk, his fingers reddening from the heat. Lu Huai. You read data pretty fast now. I got trained by dashboards. He laughed, and this time, the smile was clearly more visible. After daybreak, the team adjusted the process again. The demo sample's stability finally reached the first phase target, but outside trouble came with it. Mr. Liu's company suddenly released news that they had completed flexible power sample testing with another university, and were about to launch a new product. At the same time, an anonymous article appeared online, questioning whether Shenji's team had exaggerated its project data. It hinted that the school-enterprise cooperation involved improper benefit transfers. When Fu Cheng brought me the article, his face was frighteningly dark. This move is filthy. The article never named anyone directly, yet it pointed clearly at Shenji's project direction, forum roadshow, and corporate cooperation. In the comments, people started stirring things up, saying university research was using corporate money to build academic fame. Someone even dug up my early history of dropping out and starting a business, sneering about a grassroots boss and a beautiful doctor's capital story. After reading the article, I did not speak right away. Fu Cheng asked, suppress the heat. Not yet. They've stepped on our faces. The more anxious we look, the guiltier we seem. I printed the article and marked several technical description errors. Have legal preserve evidence. Have the technical department organize the real testing milestones. Don't let Shenji's side get dragged around by public opinion first. But Shenzi had already seen it. When he came to the company, it was still raining outside, and he had not brought an umbrella. One shoulder was soaked through. He refused the towel from the front desk and walked straight into the meeting room. There are several descriptions in this article that only people who attended the closed-door review would know. I pushed the printout toward him. I came to the same conclusion. The school wants to pause external cooperation first until the public opinion passes. What do you think? He sat across from me, red veins in his eyes from staying up late, yet his mind was frighteningly clear. Pausing is acceptable, but we cannot let the project carry dirty water. I nodded. Then we hold a technical briefing. Kai's legal counsel frowned. Holding one now is very risky. Media questions won't be controllable. Shenzi said, if we don't respond, the rumors will respond for us. He looked at me. President Liu, can your company withstand it? He called me President Liu again. At a time like this, it actually steadied my heart. I said, we can. The meeting room fell silent for a moment. Then I added, but the briefing must follow rules. Release what data can be released, protect the patents that must be protected, and handle the malicious slander through legal channels at the same time. Shenzi nodded. I'll explain the technical side. I'll explain the industrialization process. He looked at me. Are you sure? I'm sure. They may ask many things unrelated to the project. I know. They'll ask about our relationship, about the past, about my dropping out, and whether I invested in him because of old feelings. I closed the printout. If the project can stand, then so can the people behind it. The briefing was set for 3 days later. During those 3 days, Qian Shenji's team worked almost without stopping. Technical materials, test videos, process records, sample batches, patent boundaries, cooperation agreements, and summaries. Everything that could be made public was sorted item by item. Once, Shenzi fell asleep in the meeting room while his computer was still glowing. The page was frozen on a test curve chart. When I went in to get a document, my footsteps stopped. He was leaning back in the chair. His brows were still faintly furrowed, just like many years ago when he fell asleep in the library, still clutching his notes. I stood there for a few seconds. I raised the air conditioning temperature, picked up a coat, and draped it over his shoulders. The moment I set it down, he woke up. We were very close. He looked up at me, his eyes blank with confusion for a split second. Then he quickly became clear-headed. What time is it? 1 in the morning. How long did I sleep? 7 minutes. He rubbed his brow. You timed it. I happened to see. He glanced at the coat on his shoulders and did not take it off. Lu Hui. What did that text you deleted back then say? My breath caught. In the meeting room, only the cold blue glow of the projector remained. I did not ask how he knew about the text, because the answer would come sooner or later. I just had not expected it to be at this moment. He looked at me, his voice very soft. Zhao Cheng sent me old chat screenshots today. He said you were planning to confess that day, but suddenly deleted it. I lowered my eyes. He talks too much. He said he never figured it out all these years. Shenzi paused. And neither did I. The rain outside the window fell densely. I stood beside the table. My fingers pressed against the edge of the folder. After the briefing ends, I'll tell you. Shenzi did not push me. He only looked at me. Okay. The next morning, I received a message from Zhao Cheng. Bro, sorry. My mouth moved too fast. I replied, it's fine. Then he sent another one. He asked me whether you actually liked him back then. I stared at that line, and my chest felt heavily pressed down. Fu Cheng knocked and came in. Brother Liu, the media list is confirmed. I turned my phone face down. Let's go. On the day of the briefing, Shenzi stood on stage. He dismantled every doubt one by one. He did not play the victim, and he did not avoid anything. How the test data was obtained, where the samples had failed, what the current stage could prove, and what it could not prove. He explained everything clearly. Several questions from the audience that had originally carried hostility slowly softened. When it was my turn, I released Kai's cooperation process, production line records, fund usage, milestones, and legal accountability documents. A reporter asked, President Liu, the outside world has been saying you and Dr. Shen knew each other years ago. Does this investment involve personal factors? The room fell silent. Shenzi looked at me too. I held the microphone. Dr. Shen and I did know each other years ago. Camera flashes burst across the room. I continued. That is exactly why I know he would never accept a project pushed forward by personal factors. Someone below laughed softly. I looked into the cameras. A company invests in a technical route, team capability, and industrialization potential, personal relationships. If they could decide this project, then we wouldn't need to sit here today and answer questions publicly. The reporter asked again, then do you personally admire Dr. Shen? That question was extremely sharp. Fu Cheng's expression changed below the stage. I looked toward Shenzi. He did not look away. I withdrew my gaze. I admire him. The venue fell silent again for a moment. I said, in this industry, anyone willing to explain problems clearly is worth admiring. The question was pulled back to the project. After the briefing ended, the online tide began to shift. Some people clipped the video of Shenzi explaining failed samples, saying it was the first time they had seen someone speak so honestly about an unfinished project. Others analyzed the public parts of Kai's process and said this cooperation was far more grounded than many projects that started by shouting about disrupting the industry. Legal traced that anonymous article to an intermediary connected to Mr. Liu's company. Shenzi was not very surprised when he heard the result. He only capped his pen. Then let's keep testing. I looked at him. Let's continue. In that moment, I knew we had truly stepped onto the same battlefield. It was not old affection. It was the project. It was also the road where, after all these years, neither of us had to drag the other forward anymore. 11. After the briefing, the project actually moved faster. The doubts outside were beaten back, and the school side also put away its earlier hesitation about pausing everything. Qian Shenji's team officially established a joint research and development group. He came to the company every Wednesday, went to Hongsheng's pilot line every Friday, and spent the rest of the time in the school lab. I thought I could keep interacting with him purely as a partner, at least on the surface, until Jiao Cheng came to the company to find me. That day, I had just finished a meeting when the front desk said a Mr. Jiao had been waiting for me for half an hour. The moment I walked out, I saw Jiao Cheng sitting on the sofa in the reception area with an old cardboard box in his arms. He now worked at an internet company in the city. His hair was cut short, and he wore a dress shirt. He looked steadier than he had in our student days, except the moment he saw me, he opened his mouth and cursed. Lu Huai, you're impossible to book. I smiled and took the cardboard box. What is this? Stuff you left at my place before. I froze. Jiao Cheng scratched his head. I found it while moving. I was going to throw it out, but then I saw your old phone inside, and a pile of random papers. I opened the box. Inside lay an old phone with a shattered screen, along with a few draft papers from high school, repair tools, and the IOU Jiao Cheng wrote when he lent me 500 yuan back then. That phone was the one I used when I was 18. I thought I had lost it long ago. Jiao Cheng saw my expression change. His voice lowered too. When Shenzi asked about the text that day, I suddenly remembered. Your old phone might still turn on. He probably really wants to know. I looked up at him. Did you tell him the phone was with you? No. Jiao Cheng shoved his hands into his pockets. I know you're working on a project with him now. I didn't want to make trouble for you, but Lu Huai, some things have been tangled up for too long. I said nothing. He sighed. Back then, I thought you suddenly chickened out. Later, I thought you had changed your mind. But seeing how hard you fought all these years, I can pretty much guess. Guess what? That there's something wrong with your brain. I let out a laugh. Get lost. I mean it. Jiao Cheng looked at me. When you like someone, you can force yourself into acting like you're biting down on some lifelong guilt. But Shenzi didn't come here to judge you. Those words made my heart sink. Someone called me from the other side. Shenzi is here, today. He wore a white shirt and held a test report in his hand. The moment Jiao Cheng saw him, he immediately stood up. Shenzi also straightened slightly. Jiao Cheng. The two of them had not seen each other in years. They exchanged a few polite words. Jiao Cheng was tactful and did not mention the old phone. He only said he had come to drop something off. Before leaving, he patted my shoulder. Talk properly. I put the cardboard box into the office cabinet. Then I followed Shenzi into the meeting room. Through the entire meeting, I was somewhat distracted. When Shenzi reached the third round of packaging plans, he stopped. President Liu, what do you think? I snapped back to myself. Sorry, where were you just now? Everyone in the meeting room looked over. Shenzi looked at me too, but did not expose me in front of them. He only flipped the report back to the previous page. I was saying the new packaging plan requires Key to add one more set of thermal cycling tests. That's fine. After the meeting, he did not leave immediately. After everyone else had gone, he closed his laptop. You're not in the right state today. I put down my pen. I didn't sleep well last night. He did not believe me. I could see that much from his eyes. What did Jiao Cheng bring you? I stayed silent for a moment. Something related to me. I looked up. Shenzi sat on the other side of the long table, his fingers resting on the cover of the report. There was no sharpness in his questioning, only a quiet kind of waiting. Finally, I got up, went to the office, and took out that old phone. The phone had not been used for too long, and the battery was slightly swollen. I borrowed tools and a power supply from the technical department. I opened the back cover and carefully connected it. When the screen lit up, the boot animation froze for a long time. Looking at that faint glow, I suddenly felt as if time itself had been pried open by force. There was not much left inside the phone, but the message draft folder was still there. That deleted confession message had left fragments in the recovery records. When the recovery software finished running, several lines slowly pieced themselves together on the screen. Shenzi, I like you. After your interview ends, I'll wait for you downstairs at the lab building, if you're willing. I regretted it, the rest was gone. Shenzi stood beside me and stared at it in silence for a long time. Then he asked, what came after that? I looked at the screen. I'll treat you well. Saying those words out loud felt far more bitter than I had imagined. The promise my 18-year-old self could think of was that simple, and that weightless. Shenji's eyes turned red, but his voice remained steady. Then why did you hurt me? I closed the recovery interface, because back then, that was all I had. He looked at me. Even if that was all you had, you could still have said it. In my last life, I did. The instant those words left my mouth, the meeting room went so quiet that only the air conditioner could be heard. Shenji's pupils contracted slightly. I knew I could no longer hide it, and I did not want to. I placed the old phone on the table and pressed my fingers against the edge of the screen. Shenzi, some things sound absurd. You can choose not to believe me, or you can treat it as me finally losing my mind from exhaustion today. He did not interrupt me. I looked at him. I lived through this once before. The color slowly drained from his face. What do you mean? The day of the postgraduate recommendation interview was not the first time for me. I briefly told him about my previous life, without going into too much detail. I did not lay out his suffering piece by piece. I only told him that we had been together, that we had married, and that we had endured so many rotten debts of reality together. I told him he had once given up certain chances, and that I only understood it later. Some love, if fueled only by passion, can turn into a burden that drags someone down. Shenzi did not speak for a long time. He sat in the chair, his fingers lightly gripping his sleeve. When I finally stopped, he looked at me. So you deleted that message because you thought being with you would make my life worse. My throat tightened. You made that decision for me. His words were very light, yet they made my back go rigid. I looked at the redness in his eyes, and suddenly realized that all these years, what I had avoided was not only my confession, but also his right to choose. I said softly, I'm sorry. Shenzi did not accept that apology. He stood and walked to the window. Outside was the parking lot below Kai's office building, where employees were loading a batch of testing equipment into a vehicle. After a long time, he said, Lu Hui, do you know what made me angriest after hearing all this? I said nothing. He turned back. It wasn't that you deleted the message. Shenzi took a deep breath. Then he said, Lu Hui, I stopped being 18 a long time ago. Back then, you could choose not to confess. You could choose to do your own thing. You could first drag yourself out of the mud. But you cannot keep believing that as long as it's for my own good. You don't need to ask me. My throat felt blocked. All these years, I had thought that as long as I became stronger, as long as I could bring money, vision, and confidence before him, I could make up for the words I never said. But what he wanted was not compensation. He wanted his own life. To have his own choices too. I said softly, I'm sorry. Shenzi still did not accept that apology. The meeting room was filled only with the hum of the air conditioner. Looking at him, I suddenly remembered countless moments from my last life, when he signed the deferred payment forms for me. I said I would make it up to him someday. When he gave up the exchange opportunity, I said there would be other chances. When he sat in the hospital corridor and smiled, saying it was fine, I actually believed him. I was always saying someday after the fact. But what he lost back then was the present. In this life, I ran forward with everything I had, finally earning the right to sit across from him and discuss a project. Yet I had almost used the same old way to make the choice for him again. I raised my hand and picked up the old phone. The screen had already gone dark. Shenzi, he looked at me. From now on, when a decision involves you, I'll ask first. His eyelashes moved faintly. I said, the project, and feelings too. After saying that, I did not ask whether he would forgive me, nor did I ask whether we could start over. I only took the cooperation agreement from the drawer and placed it in front of him. For tomorrow's supplementary agreement, we'll use your team's version. Patent boundaries, authorship, and research and development leadership will all follow what you said. Shenzi lowered his eyes and looked at it for a few seconds. Can your company approve that? Yes. He looked up. Don't make concessions because of me. I looked at him and shook my head. It's because you're right. Finally, he said nothing more. That night, we did not talk about feelings. We revised the supplementary agreement until 1 in the morning. Patent ownership, milestone acceptance, sample testing, and the later path toward company formation were written down clause by clause. When it was time to sign, Shenzi held the pen and suddenly laughed. The first thing the two of us ever signed together is actually this. I looked at the names side by side on the paper, Lu Hui and Shenzi, separated by several lines of cold clauses, yet somehow, it felt more solid than that unsent text from when I was 18. This was good. I said that. He lifted his eyes to look at me, and I added, at least this time, I'm not the only one making the decision. His hand paused around the pen, and then he signed his name. 3 months later, the pilot sample passed the phase test. That day, the workshop was deafening. The sound of equipment, applause, and Boss Liao's laughing curses all mixed together. Shenzi stood in front of the testing machine, staring at the curve on the screen, his eyes shining just like they had all those years ago. Just like that rainy day outside the lab building. Fu Cheng shouted from the side, "Dr. Shen, it worked." Shenzi did not speak right away. He only removed his gloves and turned to look at me. I stood outside the crowd, looking back at him too. In that moment, I was suddenly certain that he had not stopped because of me, and I had finally stopped dragging him backward. We had each walked so far, only to meet again here. After the celebration dinner ended, Shenzi and I went downstairs together from Qi. The street lights below were bright, and the wine carried the faint chill of early spring. He walked beside me. Then he suddenly asked, "Lu Hui, do you still remember the full message from back then?" I stopped walking. "I remember." He handed me his phone. "Then send it now." I looked at him. His expression was calm, but the tips of his ears were slightly red. "This time, don't delete it." I took the phone, my fingertips hovering above the input box. Many years ago, when I deleted that sentence, I thought I was letting him go. Many years later, I finally understood. True respect was not pushing him away on his behalf, but saying everything clearly and then handing the choice back to him. I lowered my head and typed each word carefully. "Shenzi, I like you. This time, I want to pursue you seriously." After the message was sent, I handed the phone back to him. He glanced at it, but did not reply right away. I did not rush him either. A few seconds later, my own phone vibrated. Shenzi stood beneath the streetlight. There was a faint, gentle smile in his eyes. I lowered my head and looked at the screen. He had replied, "Lu Hui, this time, I agree to let you start over."